All right, folks. So, according to the most recent data, by the year of 2042, white Americans will no longer be the majority in the United States. I would say it's probably around the same time period that white Canadians will become a minority in Canada. I expect countries like Italy, Spain, Germany, UK, France, Australia, New Zealand. I think white people will become minorities in these countries sometime between 2050 to 2060. They're probably just slightly behind Canada and the United States. So, what happened to white people? If we go back in time, let's look at, let's say, roughly in the year of 1800, white people made up roughly 35% of the world's population. Today, they're estimated to be around 1 billion white people on Earth. It's just a rough estimation. So, out of just over 8 billion, that's about 12%. By the year of 2200, white people will make up anywhere between 2 to 3% of the world's population. Listen very carefully. What if I told you that feminism happened? I know people are going to get triggered again, but it's very important for me to talk about this. And if you're wondering if I'm getting off topic, don't worry. This is very much the exact same thing is happening in China. The population is 100% collapsing. In fact, what's happening in China is the greatest population collapse in the history of humanity. China's population is expected to shrink by over 700 million in the next 75 years. Same thing is happening in Taiwan. Same thing is happening in South Korea. Same thing is happening in Japan. And listen very carefully to what I have to say. So see, the world, they're trying to push this agenda onto you. And recently, you might have seen these ads from the World Economic Forum. Don't even get me started on them, okay? They say there's a gender equality clock that it's going to take another over 130 years before we truly reach gender equality. Ladies, have you really thought about this? I'm really trying to help you, okay? First of all, how can you have gender equality? Okay, how can you make me equal to Beyonce or Taylor Swift or Ariana Grande? Okay, diversity, equity, inclusion, it's 100% a lie. You want to fix racism, you want to fix discrimination, judge people by the contents of their character. Being a woman, that's not accomplishment. Being black, being indigenous, that's not an accomplishment. Being 2S, LGBTQPNAI++, that's not an accomplishment. You have to judge people by their merit and by the contents of their character. Right? And here's another thing. They keep pushing this agenda onto you. They tell you that, oh, you're being so oppressed. First of all, you cannot make XX equal to XY. You know what happens when you have a gender equality? You have transgender. This is why you have men entering female sports. You have men entering female sororities. You got men entering female bathrooms and female locker rooms. And the men taking women's scholarships. You have men entering Miss Universe. You caused all of this. And the population collapse is extremely dangerous. For all those people, white people are saying that, oh, you know what, why can't we have a country of just white people? I really don't want these immigrants and refugees to come here. Well, here's the issue. First of all, you stopped having children. Boom. 1970, feminism, third wave feminism. You tell all these women, oh, like, I want to be a girl boss. I want to be a career woman. I need to go to school. I need to get an education. I need to get a master's and PhD. I don't want to be a stay-at-home mom. And you know what happened? Like I mentioned in my previous video, for example, this is the reason why the dollar is being devalued so much. Before, let's say you have a universities, all the graduates were coming out, they were male, right? And the government, for example, this if you live in the capital Ottawa, that's the number one employer. They had fewer options because they had a much smaller pool to choose people from. So back then, people could get a really a good salary from the government. Let's say converted to today's money, could be $150K a year or $200,000 a year, because those were the only candidates you can choose from. Now what happens is, you put all these women to universities, you have twice as many people graduating. Now the government can afford to pay you less. So instead of $150K or $200K, they'll say, we'll pay you $75 or $80K a year. If you don't want to take it, we got twice as many candidates, right? Someone else will take the job. And what happens is when you put all these women into workplace, unless people have time for dating, for marriage, for relationships, and to start a family, you have a population collapse. And it's extremely dangerous. I tell people, people say, oh, we can just use robots. I mentioned this in China as a population collapse. Do those robots pay taxes? Do they do anything to contribute to the economy? Do they buy tickets to see the Toronto Raptors game? Do they buy tickets to see a Buffalo Bills game? Do they buy tickets to see a Taylor Swift concert? What happens, let's say if you have a small business, you own a restaurant in a small town, right? Before you had 200 people coming to your restaurant every single day. Now you have a population collapse and the town's population has shrunk by half. Now you have 100 people coming to your restaurant every single day. What happens? You go out of business. That's how dangerous this is. And what has happened is, when you face a population collapse, like in the West, where people are forced to take in immigrants and refugees, right? And like I mentioned, with the job prospect, now someone from China can come in and say that, you know what, I don't even need 75, 80K a year. Just pay me 60K a year. Then someone from India says, you know what, just pay me 55K a year. Then someone from Sri Lanka comes in and say, you know what, I'll work for 50K a year. This is why almost 3 million people in Canada are making minimum wage now, because they can afford to pay you less. You're no longer valuable. Your university education back then was way, way, way more valuable. Listen, ladies, I'm really, really trying to help you. Okay, you cannot become man. You're constantly trying to compete with man. Now this is completely backfired. Now you have people like Leah Thomas and Fallon Fox and Ann Andres, and they're entering female sports and they're destroying all your records. And I think, you know what? I actually support this now. Good for you. I've had many of these arguments with ladies in the past. You cannot stand it. It's a biological fact. Okay, and you can't accept reality. I'm trying to help you. I tell people at this school, right? If you think the men's basketball team should actually compete with the women's basketball team, I'm like, the women's team will get destroyed. The same thing will happen in volleyball, in soccer, in wrestling, in any other sport, and you lose your mind. I'm not trying to say that men are better. I'm trying to say that men and women are different. We're different, and we always will be. Ladies, you caused all of this. This LGBTQ plus movement. It's feminism coming full circle. Right now, Canada's fertility rate is at a historic low. It just dropped to 1.33 as of 2023 right now. So the replacement rate is 2.11, and you know that happens. You have a constantly shrinking working age population, and you have people that's constantly getting older. The exact same thing is happening in China, but much, much worse because China has a massive population. You have to remember this. So if you combine all the NATO countries, the entire population of NATO is roughly 940 million, but China has got 1.42 billion. They've got a massive crisis coming up. Right now, at least 11 provinces in China are running on budget deficits because of a collapsing healthcare system, because you have fewer and fewer people in the working age group that's contributing to the economy, that's paying taxes, and you have more people collecting pension, and more people are getting sick, these elderlies, and they have to regularly visit these healthcare clinics, and they have to make regular visits to the hospital for health checkups. So yeah, at least a half of China, the healthcare system is completely collapsing, and it's only gotten worse since COVID. And you see what I'm talking about, right? And the exact same thing is happening in the West. Why do you think the U.S. has an open border? They're letting all these migrants and all these refugees, all these illegal immigrants come in because they want to replace the working age population, because less and less people are having children and they need people to pay taxes. This is why the French president, Emmanuel Macron, this is why he pushed the retirement age back without approval from their citizens, because he's got no choice. You have a population that's constantly growing older and older. And the number one issue, like I mentioned, it's not because people don't want to have children anymore. Like, for example, all of the women wants the top tier man, right? Now, for example, people think society has done so much damage. Our social media and our mainstream media platforms, all these news networks, they've indoctrinated women so much. For example, nowadays a woman goes out there and they think an average guy is 6 feet and 100,000. That's like a minimum requirement. Let me give you an example. In Canada, the average height is around 5'9.5", okay? 16% of the adult male population is 6 feet, okay? You want 100,000? 11% of the adult population makes 100,000 or above. So now what happens when you multiply 16% by 11%? You know where you're down to? 1.8% of the population. And take also another factor to consider. How many Asian guys do you think are 6 feet? For an Asian guy out there in Canada that's looking to find a date, you have a less than 1% chance of finding a match. Less than 1% chance. Right, the height requirement is the most outrageous thing. I understand. Look, ladies, if you're one of those taller women, if you're 5'9", 5'10", 5'11", you want a guy that's 6 feet, 6'1", 6'2", that's perfectly fine. But so many women out there, you don't think that's the issue. I tell you, it's 100% real. I'm talking about the women who are 5'2" and they want a man that's at least 6'2". Aren't you supposed to judge people by the contents of their character? So we have a society where vast majority of the women, they're throwing themselves at the top 1, top 2, top 3% guy. So the top tier guy, he's sleeping around with all the women. And the people say, oh, men are assholes, they're cheaters, they're sleeping around with all these women. I'll say it again. I'm a 31-year-old virgin. I tried to approach women for, I would say, between the ages of 18 to 30. For 12 years, I couldn't get one single date. And the people think I'm faking it. I'm serious. They do everything they can to kill off their conversation. Sometimes it's not about dating or flirting. I'm just trying to be a nice guy. I say, oh, it's a beautiful day. Or I see a girl on campus. I say, so were you studying? The first thing they say, this has happened so many dozens of times. They say, oh, I have a boyfriend. I'm not even making this up. And for the people asking, where have you tried the online dating? Well, here's another stat, right? Women swipe right on dating apps between 4 to 5% of the time. On Tinder is 4.5%. On every single dating app, we're consistently seeing this a number 4 to 5%. The number of men that swipes right on women is 60 to 70%. For Tinder is 62% for men. And do you know what kind of men are the most likely to get matched? Okay, well, first of all, starting with height. If a man's 6 feet, you see a significant rise in the chances of this guy finding a match on Tinder. Once the guy his height drops to 5'11", you see a huge decrease. By the way, I'm 5'8", which a little bit shorter for compared to Western men, but for like a Chinese millennial, that's probably about the average. But even this, for 80 to 90% of Chinese women, they think I'm way too short. Right? And just boom, right away, they shut you down on the spot because of your height. They don't look at anything else. And this is what I'm talking about, ladies. You're making terrible choices when you're searching for a partner. And so what happens, do you know what is the ideal height? For example, if you look at Tinder, for a guy to get a match, it's anywhere between 6'3" to 6'6". Yeah, that is the height where you're most likely to find a match with a woman, which is less than 1% of the population. Yeah, I'm not making an exaggeration. Dating for the average guy, it's become impossible. And if you look at, let's say realistically, if you look at Canada, the average guy, the average income for a male is around $55,000 a year. $55,000 Canadian. Converted to US dollars, that's what, $37,000 US. And the average height is 5'9.5". That's the average guy, by the way. That means 50% of men are below that. You have to be well above average, at least in the top 20% of income earners, or you have absolutely no chance. So now what's happening is that over 50% of women in the West will be single, childless, and never get married. This is what feminism has done. And if you think I'm exaggerating, well, you know what? We'll find out as the world progresses for the next 10, 20, 30 years. Do you know which women are most miserable, which age group? Right now in the West, women between the ages of 40 and 50, they're the most miserable because, ladies, like I tell you, your beauty, your value, your youth, it's a constantly depreciating asset. By the time you're 40, you become invisible. Like a vast majority of men between the ages of 18 to 35, no man will ever look at you. Any man who has built up their status by the time they're in their 40s, they will look for a younger woman. Yeah, that's when you get extremely, extremely depressed, and you still want to blame the patriarchy when you wasted all of your youth away. Did you know that currently 1 out of 5 women between the ages of 40 to 50 are on antidepressants? 1 in 3 have been on antidepressants. And now you have a society where they're promoting LGBTQ plus curriculum every single day. Do you know why they want to promote it in schools so bad? It's because these people, they cannot have any children. And because they cannot have any children, they have to come after yours. This is why over 20% of the Gen Z population is LGBTQ plus now. And 50% of women are single and childless, will never get married. So you're down to 30% of the population that's responsible for, keeping your population afloat. The European population has 100% collapsed, and there's no coming back from this. And this is how dangerous feminism is, and so many people still can't see it. And to all the white folks that's left out there, you better start speaking up for yourselves, because it is becoming increasingly obvious, but the world is forcing you to become second-class citizens. There's so much white guilt. There's so much anti-white racism. Soon, the majority of politicians and the lawmakers and the policymakers on every single level or branch of government, vast majority of them will be non-white, and they will do everything they can to discredit you, to destroy your history, to destroy your culture. I know I've said a lot in this video, but I really want you to think about it. Thank you guys for staying till the end. During next week's video, I will discuss my thoughts on climate change. Thank you.